Hello and welcome to the English Daily News. Medical sources inside Fallujah declared that 6 civilians, including 3 new children, died due to starvation that is caused by the imposed blockade on the city by the Iraqi military forces. The sources said in remarks to an international agency that the children's death was caused by drought, which they suffered for some time, noting that the trapped residents are arriving continuously to the hospitals in search of medical materials to save their children from the drought, but they do not find what they ask for because the hospitals in the city are out of medicines. The United Nations demanded to establish a humanitarian corridor to safely deliver the humanitarian aid to the besieged city of Fallujah. The Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations Assistant Mission for Iraq, Liz Grant, described in a press statement the humanitarian situation in that city as complicated, and she called the Iraqi government to guide the families in Fallujah to areas which they control and take them to safe places to ensure their security. Ms. Grant expressed that the United Nations is ready to provide humanitarian assistance once they are notified by the Iraqi government to open the safe corridors. According to Reuters media agency, the Turkish warplanes conducted airstrikes on Kurdish targets in northern Iraq, which resulted in destroying caves and shelters used by the Kurdish forces. The media agency added that F-16 and F-4 jets destroyed the Kurdistan Workers' Party targets in the Zap area of neighboring Iraq, where PKK insurgents are based. Ali Alawi, whom Iraqi Prime Minister Haidar al-Abadi nominated last week to serve as finance minister in a new technocratic government, withdrew his candidacy. Reuters media agency stated that Alawi is at least the second ministerial candidate to pull out. The nominee for oil minister withdrew on Friday, apparently because he had not been formally put forward by the main Kurdish groups. The move, which threatens to weaken patronage networks that sustain the elite's wealth and influence, shocked the political establishment that has ruled Iraq since the removal of Saddam Hussein. The meetings continues among the representatives of the political and parliamentary blocs in order to save the reform process and reach common understanding between the various political blocs. One of these meetings was between the Iraqi Parliament Speaker Salim Al-Jubouri with the Foreign Minister and Chairman of the National Alliance Ibrahim Al-Jafari, where the two sides discussed the developments in the political crisis and ways to enforce the reform process in accordance with the principle of partnership and constitutional frameworks. According to Al-Jubouri office statement, that Mr. Al-Jubouri confirmed the need to continue the meetings between the various partners to get to develop a common vision for the draft reform as voted by the Chamber of Deputies. According to the Daily Mail newspaper, that ISIL shot and killed 2 men before hanging their bodies from a roundabout in Raqqa after accusing the victims of spying. The 2 men, believed to be Syrian nationals, were dressed in orange jumpsuits before their murders. According to human rights source inside the occupied city, the men were shot before crucified. ISIL has murdered more than a dozen civilians over the past week, accusing them of a range of crimes. The newspaper added that the US President Barack Obama said destroying ISIL remains his top priority during the final months of his presidency. The UN envoy to Libya has urged a rapid and complete handover of power to a unity government that arrived in Tripoli a week ago, warning that a fragile peace in the city may not hold if the new government is unable to deliver.
The government in Tripoli, under Prime Minister Wael, they want to hand over, and Prime Minister Wael himself, he resigned and he made the way free for his ministers to hand over power. I think the most important thing is to have a peaceful handover of power. The first one is, yes, the House of Representatives has to continue to arrange a meeting with all members of the Parliament in order to endorse the government. This is very clear. The legitimacy, the final legitimacy for the government of national accord comes from Tobruk. It comes from the Parliament. But the second decision of them was also, because as long as this is not possible, the train moves. And they encourage the Presidency Council, once security permits, to go into Tripoli to ensure the immediate, orderly and peaceful transfer of power. I mean, Tripoli is a city governed by militias and they have to be tolerated by the militias. But as you see, it was the naval base where they landed, and the Libyan Navy in Tripoli, I mean, they accepted them. And these are regular army forces, and they are protected by, they are sitting in the naval base protected by regular forces. But of course, you must have been tolerated by the militias governing Tripoli, and this was done.
Donald Trump held a rally in New York, telling his supporters that Cruz has shown hatred for New York as Trump seeks to shore up support in his home state.
Do you remember during the debate when he started lecturing me on New York values like we're no good, like we're no good? And I started talking to him about the World Trade Center, the bravery, the incredible bravery of everybody, our police, our firemen, our everybody. The bravery that was shown was incredible. We all lived through it. We all know people that died. And I've got this guy standing over there looking at me, talking about New York values with scorn in his face, with hatred of New York. So folks, I think you can forget about him. You can forget about him. But when the people that know me the best think so much that it have poll numbers that nobody can believe. So we're going to do great. And I have to say, in 2 weeks, meaning 2 weeks from yesterday, go vote.
Democratic presidential candidate Bernie Sanders took a swipe at Democratic rival Hillary Clinton a day after winning Wisconsin's nominating contest.
Secretary Clinton appears to be getting a little bit nervous. We have won 7 out of 8 of the recent primaries and caucuses. And she has been saying lately that she thinks that I am, quote unquote, not qualified to be president. Well, let me just say in response to Secretary Clinton, I don't believe that she is qualified. If she is through her super PAC taking tens of millions of dollars in special interest funds.
Ohio Governor John Kasich delivered his State of the State address, where he focused on police and community interactions in the state and said progress had been made in that area.
We've also made important progress in improving community and police relations. Over the past few years across this nation, we've seen growing tension between communities and police, and the divisions have been severe and oftentimes violent. We've always known that this has to be dealt with because we won't have safe neighborhoods if there's mistrust between our communities and law enforcement. Thanks to your help, I'm so proud to say that Ohio is leading the way. Our efforts began when we pulled together a diverse group of law enforcement experts, community leaders from throughout the state, to recommend strategies for strengthening the bond between our communities and the police.
According to the Guardian newspaper, that the White House is declining to offer public support for long-awaited legislation that would give federal judges clearer authority to order technology companies such as Apple to help law enforcement crack encrypted data. The sources said that the Obama administration's refusal to either endorse or oppose legislation from Senators Richard Burr and Dianne Feinstein, the Republican chair and top Democratic respectively of the Senate Intelligence Committee, stems in part from ongoing divisions among various federal agencies over encryption. According to the Guardian newspaper, that Iceland's coalition government has rejected calls from protesters and opposition leaders to stand down, saying a day after popular ferry at the offshore holdings of the family of Iceland's prime minister forced his departure that it has reshuffled and will carry on. A government spokesman told reporters that Agriculture and Fisheries Minister Johansson was named as a successor to the current Icelandic Prime Minister. The first major casualty of the Panama Papers leaks, with the parliamentary elections due in early 2017 to be brought forward to this autumn. The newspaper added that the move could allow the hard-pressed center-right administration to avoid a snap election. It would almost certainly lose sidestepping demands from an enraged opposition and many protesting Icelanders who demonstrated outside Parliament for a third straight day for it to stand down. The White House said it will redirect $589 million in funds to prepare for the Zika virus before the mosquito that carries it begins to emerge in the United States, but urged Congress to act quickly on its request for more money.
We heard from states that they're keenly aware of the threat that the disease poses, and many do not have the money that they need for basic tasks that would prevent the spread of Zika. Over this time, Congress has done nothing. Now, we know that we cannot continue to fund a robust response to this disease without adequate resources, particularly for our partners in state and local government who bear much of the burden of fighting Zika. So earlier today, as many of you may have seen, the administration announced that we would reprogram about $600 million to bolster the ongoing Zika response. We've consistently said that an available option was for the government was to repurpose some existing Ebola funds that would not undermine our fight against that deadly disease. But we also told Congress that just using some of the Ebola funds would be insufficient.
It was a celebration at the Universal Studios Hollywood, where music filled the air and fireworks lit up of the sky for the unveiling of the wizarding world of Harry Potter. And that is all for the news. Thanks for watching.